Good evening. I'm actually going to take off my mask and get comfortable here for a second. Thank you all for being here this evening. I'm Cherie Scott, and I am the host of what I think is one of the most awesome, wonderful series that's being offered in Maine right now, Talking Food in Maine with intimate conversation with Maine pioneers in the food scene. And today, I can't tell you how excited I am about having a Maine pioneer here joining us, because Amber Lamke, to me, is just, she's a visionary, you know, and she sees things in ways that most people don't. You know, folks look at perceived lack, and she sees opportunity. And she's been able to, with some thought leaders, come together in community and create a movement. And I think that's the reason why you're here tonight, because you've been touched by that in some way or the other in the time you've lived here in Maine. So without further ado, because we have so much wonderful listening to do today, which I'm actively going to do is listen, please join me in welcoming just the most incredible human. She is as kind as she is brilliant, and she's as innovative as she is charming, as you will see, and funny, and has some really neat backstories. So join me in welcoming the one, the only, Amber Lamke, please. Thank you. Come on out, Amber. Thank you for being here. Take a seat. So how are you?
I'm great. I will remove my mask too, if that's okay.
Awesome. Yeah, whatever makes you comfortable. So you obviously have some serious fans out there, because they came out in the middle of a pandemic. Thank you all for being here to support you and your talk tonight.
So nice.
And Amber had the most awesome staff put together, the incredible lineup that you see on the stage there for you all, for your drooling pleasure. So feel free to come by and take photos. You can do your selfie if you like, or whatever it is that moves you. But thank you for doing that.
Great to be with you, yeah.
Thanks
for having me, Cherie.
So tell us all where you just came from.
Oh gosh, I've been traveling a little bit. Haven't gotten out much during the pandemic, but just got back from San Francisco yesterday and Berkeley. The Good Food Awards ceremony was to be hosted there last week, but sadly got postponed, and a number of my travel arrangements were non-refundable. So I had planned to have my daughter along with me to go see UC Berkeley out in California, and so we kept our schedule on, and we went out anyway, and as always happens in the grain business, did a fair bit of bakery exploration.
Of course.
Croissant exploration. It's always good to collect other people's business models and stories and store those away for when you need them.
Did you hit tartines?
So yes.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah, what did you get?
I had a beautiful salad of radicchio and speckled gem lettuces with their mushroom toast.
Sounds delicious.
Toast with
did you get any
mushrooms
pastry from Tartine?
No pastry this time, no.
I'm sure it was delicious.
But always great bakeries to see, and so that was fun.
Gosh,
and
yeah.
then a couple days in, we hopped over the bridge over to Berkeley and did some exploration over there as well. And I think UC Berkeley has risen to the top of my daughter's wish list for college. So
nice. So you have some traveling in your future, which is great.
See, yeah,
awesome.
We'll see. That'll be a long commute.
Oh, yes, but worth it.
Yeah.
You can get all your pastry and your salads, so that's good. Well, thank you so much for coming all the way from Skowhegan today, and you just got in last night from San Francisco. You're probably exhausted on a different time zone, but we're going to pick your brain a little bit today, because we have so many great questions, I'm sure, that are still in everyone's minds for the Q&A. But the first question I kind of wanted to ask you was, you know, back in 2001, you chose to mindfully move back to Skowhegan. Can you tell us, what was it that kind of moved you to make that lifestyle change?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Brunswick, and my dad was in the military, so that was home base for us. My parents had honeymooned in Maine, in the Rangeley area, and so always knew in his Navy career that they wanted to make their way back to Maine to raise kids. So I moved to Brunswick when I was about 9. And Maine has always felt like home.
Where did you move from?
I was born in Iceland.
Really?
They hopped to Washington State, California, Virginia, and then Maine eventually.
That's a neat fun fact I didn't know about you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm a twin. We'll talk about that
Yes,
later. But,
you are a twin.
We were born in a Navy hospital in Keflavik, Iceland. So.
That is so cool. Have you been back since?
Yes, a couple of times.
So you have Iceland citizenship?
No, I wish I had cared about that before I was of age to be able to take advantage of dual citizenship. But I have been back to visit, and I love it.
It's awesome.
It.
So
Anyway, to answer that question, how did I get back to Skowhegan? So I went away to college to New York State, to Ithaca, New York, and then got a master's degree at UNH in communication disorders and speech pathology. So I moved back to Maine to start my career in speech pathology. I worked in Portland, and soon thereafter met my husband contradancing in North Whitefield, and I think some of our dear friends may be here. Tim and Karen, if you're here, give a shout out. Who also met at the North Whitefield Grange, contradancing. So we met at a contradance, and honestly, my job was more portable when we decided to get married. So I still worked for the practice in Portland while moving to Skowhegan, where my husband is a family doc and had rooted himself at that point. So
okay.
So 2001 was my first year in Skowhegan, and with a lot to learn about.
I'm sure it was a bit of a culture change
rural
from
Maine,
Portland to rural Maine.
Yeah.
So I read in Bread magazine, by the way, which is a great story on Maine Grains, that you had this epiphany in 2007. Tell us what that was about.
Well, so we moved to Skowhegan, and like many other rural Maine towns, it had needs. It has suffered the ills of mill manufacturing jobs that had moved away, and a downtown that needed to reinvent itself. And so Skowhegan was designated as a Main Street community in 2005, which meant that we, as a community, were adopting a nationally recognized approach for downtown revitalization.
Okay.
Under the National Trust for Historic Preservation. That requires the involvement of citizens, so I was just tapped as a new citizen in Skowhegan to volunteer. And the very first Main Street director asked if I would help start a farmer's market in Skowhegan. And my husband and I were already patrons of the existing farmer's market in Skowhegan, which was 3 farmers that would meet behind the Chamber of Commerce every Saturday, and it was sparsely attended. So I said to the director that I think rather than start a new farmers market, let's see what we can do to build up the farmers market that's here and see what we can do to help. So I really entered as a volunteer. That early work to help grow the farmers market helped me understand what the opportunities and challenges were in farming in our area. We have affordable land. We have a back to the land kind of hippie generation that really came up and settled the area and brought with them art and other talents, and they built their own homes. They had gardened for years, and in some cases their children, the next generation, were wanting to come back to the area to farm. And we were trying to make room for them in the farmers market in these early years. So to bring on more vendors in your market, you needed more shoppers to support more vendors, and so I was part of that growth. But grains were really missing from those growth conversations, not only in Maine, but all over the country. So, many of you who shop farmers markets or are in farmers markets, you know that the rules of a farmers market are that you have to produce or make the food that you bring to a farmers market. But bakers, which are considered an anchor part of a farmer's market, really important for the success of a farmer's market, we're coming into farmer's markets with banana bread.
With bananas from...
White flour, bananas, white sugar, what does that have to do with local food, right?
Right.
So farmers markets across the country were starting to sort of do that head-scratching moment about what do we do with bakers? Why aren't bakers using local grains? Why aren't there local grains for them to use? And so it was through that process that really we started asking those same questions in Skowhegan. And
what were those questions? Like what was that fundamental question that kind of spurred this whole movement?
Yeah, well, I can't take credit for that occurring to me. I really turned to a dear friend, Arie Barden, as part of this story.
Oh yeah, there's a nice picture of Arie right there.
We had some of our earliest friends in Skowhegan were the founders of Maine Wood Heat, the multi-generational family that started with Albie and his wife Cheryl, who started a business building wood, initially kind of wood stoves, but that turned into these a specialty in building brick masonry wood-fired heaters for your home that are super efficient. So where you can burn a wood fire in the morning and the stove in a Russian and Finnish style will radiate heat all day long. So Maine Wood Heat, they had become our friends, and they were starting to import a masonry core from France to build wood-fired ovens for bakers and pizza makers. And they were in touch with bakers that were saying, where can I get local grains? Why don't we have local grains in Maine? Help us connect to farmers that could grow grain for us. You have one of the visionaries here in the Damascotta area, but Jim Amaral of Borealis Breads was one of the first bakers in Maine to adopt the use of local grains from Aroostook County. So in Skowhegan, it was our connection to the Bardens who were saying, you know, Albie knocked on my door one day and said, can you help me organize farmers and bakers and people with my ovens to talk about where we're going to get more local grains and what we can do to spur a movement. Maine had a rich history of growing grains at one time. It was really last in the mid-1800s that we grew most of our grains here in Maine, but plenty of it, enough to be an exporter of grains. So sometimes you'll read in our website, or I like to share the fact that in Somerset County alone, there were 239,000 bushels of wheat grown in 1837. Well, that's at the consumption standards of today, that's enough to feed over 100,000 people. So Somerset County's 50,000 people. We were moving grain out of the state of Maine in those years.
So we never got to enjoy it.
Right.
But it was being exported.
Right. So really, Albie was my prompt to try to be of service, facilitating conversations about grain. And it was around our dining room table in Skowhegan that we decided to launch the first Kneading Conference in 2007.
So that was sort of Albie's role in kind of creating and sparking that idea for the conference, that conversation.
Yep, and just
conference.
really helping build community around the idea.
So tell me a little bit about this other person in your life that kind of came in and became a really stronghold, Michael Scholes. Tell us about Michael and what his role was.
Yeah. Michael Scholes is a friend of my sister's and mine who we met working at Pine Tree Camp in Rome, Maine, many, many years ago. So again, it's sort of in preparation to become a speech pathologist. In my college years, I had taken a job at Pine Tree Camp where you work with children and adults with developmental and physical disabilities in the summertime, which is just, you know, all out fun for campers. We met Michael, who had grown up in Canada, but also had roots to Waterville. His dad was a swim coach for a while. So we met Michael in those years when he was the overnight and at one time boating, involved in the boating program at camp, and had been a longtime friend. We reconnected when I moved to Skowhegan because I didn't know he was in the area, but here I married Mike, a family doc in Skowhegan, and Mike was on the recruitment and retention committee at the hospital to try to recruit new doctors to the area. And one day he said to me, hey, do you mind being a part of this recruitment dinner that we're having? We have a young doctor named Julie Phelps coming to the area who is considering settling back in the area. And I said, Julie Phelps? I'm like, I know Julie Phelps. You know, Michael had been in love with Julie for years and years. She worked in the infirmary at camp, and Michael had gone on to follow Julie around the country through her residency. And I knew they had gotten married, but I had no idea they were considering moving back to the area. So I said, Julie, I know Julie. Does that mean Michael and Julie are back in the area? And
world.
they bought a farm in Albion, as it turned out, and Julie now runs her own practice in the Waterville area as a family doc. But knowing that Michael was in the area, we reconnected, and I learned that he had purchased one of Albie's wood-fired ovens and had learned to make bread.
And he's a baker.
While working at the Black Trumpet Bistro down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So my sister and I, kind of new to the central Maine area, and Mike and I, you know, starting to make friends. There were no bakeries in the area in Skowhegan.
I heard there was a bankery though.
The bankery came along in 2005. So while Michael Scholes was getting his feet wet baking wood-fired breads in Albie's oven, we were taking weekly trips out to his house, which was, you know, 35, 40 minutes, to stock up on bread, buy bread from Michael, and bring it back to Skowhegan and sell it to all of our friends. And so there was just a lack of good bread in Skowhegan. Michael was driving up to Canada, up to New Brunswick, to buy a heritage variety that he loved working with called Red Fife. Some of you might be familiar with it, but it's got a very characteristic reddish color and a sweet, nutty flavor. And so anyway, he was making the most delicious breads, and we were able to reconnect in those years. So Michael joined this steering committee of the first Kneading Conference with Albie, and we gathered farmers and friends who we knew had former lives as pastry chefs and restaurateurs, and people who just loved to organize, and people who knew everyone in Skowhegan, kind of pulling together this community group that could help launch the first Kneading Conference.
So where did you go from the Kneading Conference to the Maine Grain Alliance? Because there's a lot of folks who are very familiar with the Kneading Conference, and there's a whole bunch of folks who are very familiar with Maine Grain Alliance and perhaps don't know that connection. So would you be able to kind of link those dots for us a little bit?
So the Kneading Conference really was the first event. It was really designed to spur the conversations about local grain and local grain economies.
And this is in 2007, right?
This is in 2007. And really it was right after the first conference that it ignited an interest. It ignited bakers who wanted to use local grain, and this grassroots group of us started being asked throughout the year to be a resource to people all year long. Well, what about seed? And I'm a farmer and I want to find equipment, or how do I learn more? And so we really realized that this is beyond just a single event. We're being asked to be a resource for a year-round slate of activities and information. So we took on what we felt like we could take on incrementally, but we realized that this is the role of a nonprofit organization in Maine that we founded in 2010 called the Maine Grain Alliance. So the Maine Grain Alliance is a nonprofit, and it still to this day holds the Kneading Conference, the Artisan Bread Fair. It organizes a year-round slate of educational activities around baking, which are now both in person and virtual. It is the beneficiary of some funds from great partners like Allagash Brewing Company and Skowhegan Savings Bank to be able to give away technical assistance grant funds to grain-based businesses throughout Maine. And we now also steward at the Maine Grain Alliance a seed restoration project that works to revive the biodiversity of our rare and heritage variety seeds here in Maine.
So how did Maine Grains come to be from all of this? And what was the question that led to, okay, we're going to start this in a jailhouse?
Honestly, it was the very first Kneading Conference. We brought grain historians to speak at the conference, and when we learned these facts about how much grain we had grown in Maine, the question really shifted immediately from, can we grow grain in Maine for bread, to how do we restore what we used to do, and why aren't we doing it anymore? So, so there was a real shift after that first conference and first conversation, and what came out of the networking was that really it was a lack of infrastructure in Maine. So our potato farmers in Maine are still rotating with oats and rye and other cover crops, but lacked the machinery to process those grains into food grade goods. So oats, right, which love Maine's climate. They like it cool and sweet, and they can deal with our moisture in this climate, weren't being processed in Maine because we lacked machinery to crack that husky coating off of an oat to turn it into an edible product. So really it was immediately after the first conference that Michael and I paired up, and we started taking some road trips. I wanted to see this mill he was buying Red Fife from, just to understand what does that look like, where is that happening, how much room does that take. I was embedded in the Main Street process at this point, so I knew there were vacant buildings all over Skowhegan that needed a new purpose in life. And so, could we put a mill in an old building? Those wheels started turning then. And so Michael and I just did a fair bit of road tripping all over the Northeast to see if there was any local grain being grown or milled, what did that look like, at what scale. And really what was apparent was that there was a little bit happening, but it fell into a few different camps. So we either saw historic water mills that were preserving a demonstration milling outfit to be able to show people what used to happen, but not operating at a scale that could feed a community.
Right.
Or you had farmers that were determined to figure out grain processing and collecting machinery and tinkering and figuring things out in their barns enough to feed a set of locavores in their community that were hungry for this product, but not really set up to have employees or distribute to a region. And many of them were saying, you know, if I'm gone tomorrow, no one knows how to operate what I've just set up in my barn. So it just was very fragile. Everything that we saw was very small and fragile in the Northeast. And so we began to recognize that there is a role to be played for a business that will solve some of these infrastructure challenges and commit to serving a region.
So why is it that sort of that really old-fashioned stone mill grinding versus commercial, why is that a dying art? Why is it that there aren't places like the University of Kansas or KU, why aren't they kind of holding on to that whole method and teaching it and passing it along?
That's a great question. It's slow, and it produces a fresh product that still leaves the essential oils and fats that are inherent in the grain in the flour. Okay. And that is the part of the flour that will go rancid if it sits on a grocery store shelf for too long. So we really made a shift in this country and all over the world to a commercialized flour product where we focused on removing the germ and the oils to preserve a long, extensive shelf life for grocery store sales. It compromised the quality of the flour and the nutrient content of the flour, but it also shifted us into roller milling instead of stone milling. And so just to explain the difference there for a minute so people understand the difference.
Definitely, for sure.
Stone milling really is what it says, right? You have two stones and they are turning. The top stone is turning. You can have horizontally opposed stones. You can have vertically opposed stones. You can, at the most rudimentary level, you can have a stone that has been carved out with like a mortar and pestle. You can grind grain that way too. So the machinery that we're using that we'll see in pictures in a moment comes out of Europe, and it is the traditional stone milling technology.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
White flour is being produced on roller mills, which is different technology. So you have steel rolls, some are corrugated rolls, some are smooth rolls, but they are designed to crack the kernels open and shear the endosperm, the white part, away from the bran, so that you can more cleanly remove all the bran and remove all the germ from the white flour. And by removing the germ and the bran, you're creating a more pure product that is shelf stable and suits the tastes that the American palate had become. I would say that is changing. But so in any event, it's two different technologies, and so it's very hard to learn how to stone mill anymore because not many people are doing it.
So what I love about Maine Grains is that you've actually taken that challenge on head on, right? Because instead of producing a ton of product, you produce much less product, but you have more hands doing it.
Yes.
Versus two people behind a computer screen hitting a button and it's just going to town. So on that mill. So your challenge then is, not only is there not enough resources to teach, but you're taking on folks who have no skills and you're teaching them something that's a dying art. So you're saving two things, right? You're kind of bringing back those traditional methods of milling, and you're also passing them on, which is great. And I think that's what's so special about Maine Grains to me at the very fundamental core of what you do. But can you maybe walk us through that wonderful mill thing that we're looking at? What do you call it?
Yeah, it's a stone mill.
It's a stone mill.
So ultimately, what you just described, Cherie, is it's both the challenge and the opportunity of creating a business that solves a problem, right? So I did go out to Kansas at one point, to one of only two places in the world where you can learn flour milling anymore. I went to the University of Kansas at the International Grains program for a week-long intro to flour milling course, knowing that I was going to learn about white flour milling. But really, wanting to know more about white flour milling so that I could sort of put what we were doing in perspective around like how flour is made in not only our country, but the world, how it's traded in the world. So the class was in Manhattan, Kansas. It was 12 people from all around the world. I was the only woman. And it was really people that were joining the class. Some were grain traders. So really they were going to trade wheat futures on the market. Some of the participants were managing white flour mills and wanted to learn how to manage better. There was a fellow from India who was learning about dehulling technologies to be able to process his rice better. So it was really a mixed bag, and the class was really helpful to me in learning safety. You can blow up a flour mill. We didn't want to do that. You know, how do you be safe? How do you configure the machinery in a mill so that it all flows and works properly? What is the technology you need to take a hull off of something? So I was learning all of those things. I learned some pivotal facts in that class as well. One was that only 0.1% of the flour being produced in our country was being produced organically. So 0.1% means there's a whole lot of non-organic material being grown and milled and consumed in the United States. So what we were talking about in Maine with organic production was pretty unique. I also had asked I knew that the course was not about stone milling, but I had asked to be pointed in the direction in their library at the International Grains Program to some resource on stone milling, because that's what I really needed to learn more about. And so the oldest guy on faculty there, who was in his 80s, said, no, we don't have anything like that here. So what occurred to me really was that the opportunity here, it was both a challenge, but the opportunity is that no one else is out there doing this. No one else is out there learning about stone milling a heck of a lot faster than we are. So that really the learning we would do, that Michael and I would do to start the mill, would be peer-to-peer. And so it set us on a course to connect with some farmers and millers in Denmark and Germany. And there were some pioneers out on the West Coast that were starting to buy mills and build mills to mill in their own bakeries. So that's where we would learn. That's where we would learn to operate this machinery. This mill that's in the slide is from Austria. It's produced by the Osti Roller Company in Linz, Austria, right in the Alps. And we bought this machinery before a company in Vermont started making mills again. So up until this point, you could not still buy a 4-foot diameter, large format millstone produced in the US. So we had looked to Europe and decided on this machinery. It's not only beautiful, but it's new, it's simple technology. The machinery is guaranteed for life. It's a third-generation family company. And when you work around this machine, even when it's running, kind of the wood dampens the noise. It's very, it's no louder than a car idling. And there are other stone mills that are encased in metal, and they're not quite so quiet. And so we just thought this was a beautiful piece of machinery, not only to look at, but also to work around. So we now have 2 of them. We're about to buy a 3rd one.
I was going to ask you, can you just run these all day?
You can.
Because they don't really heat up.
They are designed to run continuously. We don't. We run a shift now at the mill that is 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., but we don't run through the night, but they're designed to. You could. And in some larger European mills, you would see these lined up in rows. You would see a whole row of them on one side and a whole row on the other side. But to your point, to your question, they came out of favor both for shelf life reasons, but also they're slow. They produce flour more slowly. So that means your efficiency, your labor efficiency, all of your operational efficiencies are less. So your margins are tighter when you're stone milling.
No pun intended here, but you're totally going against the grain here, Amber, with everything you're doing. I don't know why I just had to drop it in there. Yeah. But that's what makes this so special for us to actually have this moment to talk about how you're doing it. Because I think what everyone's fascinated about is, how did that happen? How did you go from that first batch to having all of these varietals, and how did you work to build that community around Maine Grains figure out, how do we partner with all these farmers? And you know, the fact that you had all of that kind of going already with the Main Street program, you already had, you know, you had your groove going on. So I think you just kind of took it and expanded it throughout the state of Maine. So can you walk us through sort of that grassroots effort of how you got the whole state behind you and the farmers? And
yeah, you know, a piece we haven't talked about yet is just why grow grains in Maine if it's going to be more expensive to do so. And I think that is the same conversation we can have about, you name it, what kind of food, but plenty of foods are going to be more expensive to grow in Maine than if they're mass produced someplace else. But the sort of central tenet we were working with is that grains are a really important part of your farm ecosystem. It's, if you think of them as a cover crop, right? What are we doing when we cover crop? We're managing the growth of perennial weeds with grains and not chemicals. We are improving soil tilth. We're adding carbon back into the soil by growing a cover crop and tilling it back in, and adding bulk to the soil that can then hold water, for example. So animals can eat grains. Grains are essentially a grass. So the grains are just at the tip of a grass that grows tall or short, but the byproduct of that is also straw. When we started the Kneading Conference, there was already an effort happening in Maine to work with Maine's organic dairy farmers to grow grains on their farms, because the importing of organic straw for animal bedding was becoming really expensive. And so in the interest of making organic dairy farming financially viable, the University of Maine and Rick Kersbergen and Ellen Mallory and others were working on, let's work with dairy farmers to grow their own straw to reduce the cost of that input. So grains are important for soil management, whole systems, farming, animal husbandry, animal feed, food. For all of those reasons, it's good soil management, it's organic soil management. So whether it's cheaper to grow all of our grains for bread in the Midwest or not, it's still important to maintain in a regional ecosystem, no matter what region you're in. So Maine has its own unique ecosystem, but what you're starting to see as this movement takes off is other ecosystems adopting the grain that is most suitable to their environment. So it may be a desert wheat that's more appropriate in Arizona. It may be oats and buckwheat here, but it's important. So really that has made sense to people when you describe it in that way. The products are more expensive to grow, and on a small scale. The combine is going to cost the same, if not more, to farm 30 acres as it is 3,000 acres. So if you have to borrow money to buy the equipment to grow the grain, you're harvesting less to be able to make your loan payments. So it is a different economic picture out here, but still important nonetheless. So that's the argument we've made from the beginning. And in the commodity world of grain trading, you'd be looking at the Chicago and Minneapolis boards of trade every morning to figure out the going rate for trading grains. And I tried to get into that for a while. I tried to at least be educated on that and care about it, but ultimately it is somewhat irrelevant to what we're doing in Maine. So I don't look at those anymore. We're impacted by global trends. So right now is an interesting supply chain moment where, Asia is scarfing up buckwheat, for example, from the United States because of scarcity and desire to stockpile, and that is driving the cost of buckwheat up for even us here in Maine. So we need to be aware, but I'm not setting price for our farmer based on the Minneapolis Board of Trade every morning.
But that gives you so much more control over it too as well. So how are you setting the price for the farmers? And let's get back to that question about how you're building that community of farmers that you're working with directly in bringing us all of those products.
Yeah, really it's been an evolution. Some of our first farmers were those organic dairy farmers who were taking risks to try to grow grains because they had cows and they could feed grain to their cows if it didn't work out for humans. And Henry Perkins was one of those farmers in Albion. Happened to be Michael Scholz's neighbor, and they were partnering to grow some of that red fife on Michael's land, but other organic dairy farmers as well. We've also got Maine's potato farmers in the northern part of the state who need to rotate with other crops to maintain healthy soil. So Oats were very common. Oats and rye and buckwheat were already happening up in northern Maine. They just weren't being moved into food grade streams. They were being sold into Canada, or they were just being tilled in because the price being offered by Canadian oat companies sometimes wasn't even worth spending the time to go harvest them. So it might have been more cost effective just to till them back into the soil. That was all happening at the point that we were building our business plan. So we really started there. We started with Maine's earliest adopters with grain growing, formed connections with them, and bought what they had, even when there was still improved quality to happen. But we recognized we were all in this together. You know, we're taking a risk, they're taking a risk, and we need to help each other out for a while.
And how did you set price with them? How did you figure out if if you had more control over that, you want to make sure they're paid well and you're able to even make a profit and sell it?
Really in our business plan, I started with what they were telling me. What do you need to make this worth your while? And we worked up from that. So then what do I need to put in terms of equipment cost and labor and packaging and marketing and distribution to get that to market? And do I think I can sell it for that in order to make it work? We've only had, as the miller, we do have to do a lot of education around price. That is a common conversation, but I think the public is getting more used to why it is that small regionally produced foods might cost more, and so we find a very willing public by and large. There's only a couple cases I can think of where I went to purchase a grain from a farmer at the price they gave to me, and I really couldn't move the product at the price it needed to be moved at. Then it became a negotiation, which is that I can keep buying this from you, but I can't move it at the price you're selling it to me. So if you can afford to sell it to me for less, I think we might be able to move more. And we were able to work those things out. So I do think, one of the things that's unique is these are peer-to-peer relationships that we're forming even with our farmers. And we now buy from about 45 different family farms. And I know we'll talk a little bit about the cornmeal that we're working with now, but even, I would just—
The Bantu farms,
I would just stress in this conversation that, we have a really diverse farming community in Maine, and no two farmers are exactly alike. They have different challenges, different equipment, different methods. So one of our newest relationships is with the Somali Bantu community of Auburn. They'll be moving their farm here as we speak to a new permanent farmstead. But that is a farm of over 200 families that divvy up the available farmland that they have in Auburn, and they're farming their plots all by hand. So you're seeing Muhyiddin in this picture. He is the farm manager and the leader of Liberation Farms. They have a finite plot, so if the number of families grows, you get a smaller plot because it's all going to be divvied up so each family has a bit of it to work. All of the corn that's grown there is planted by hand, harvested by hand. There's no machinery that's going into planting the corn. They're planting an African white flint corn that is native to their culture, and using a method of planting in the understory of the corn all of the squashes and tomatoes and greens that they might want to round out their diet. They harvest those things all summer long, and then in the fall, September, October, they're harvesting the dry corn as the very last part of the harvest by hand. So they are growing, but they're not aspiring to grow in the same way that an Aroostook County farmer might be aspiring to grow the scale of their operation. The Maine Grain Alliance, through some of our technical assistance grants, has been able to support them in buying very low-tech tools to support them in drying down their corn, and in some cases that's just greenhouse cover to keep the elements off of it, or fans, or solar dryers, or screen cleaners to be able to take out the weed seeds which can hold moisture in the corn. But it's a unique model where the families keep what they need for the year. All of the surplus is pooled, cleaned, and sold to us or sold to a tortilleria company in Portland. So we buy the corn, we process it, it allows them to not have to invest in the processing machinery, And then in some cases, they buy it back wholesale to be able to sell at retail prices to their community and markets. So it's been a great partnership, but a very unique model and something that you don't see in many places.
That's awesome. So I think you submitted that for the Good Food Awards.
Yeah.
But you said it got nominated, but this is what won last year, right?
Yeah. So
tell us about these.
Part of the reason I was out in San Francisco was for the Good Food Awards. The Good Food Foundation is a nonprofit organization that recognizes small producers of specialty foods every year, and we've been fortunate enough to be winners for this black Egyptian barley, for the Marfax beans that you see pictured here, for our polenta and some other things. And I did submit the Liberation Farms cornmeal this year, which was a finalist. And sadly, one of the reasons for organizing the trip to San Francisco in the first place was because the ceremony was scheduled for last week, which got postponed due to COVID. So in any event, it's a wonderful organization that showcases really beautiful foods from around the country. And it's a process of blind taste testing. So a team of judges get to taste your foods without knowing who you are or how it was prepared. You have to keep things very simple so they can be boiled. You can add a little bit of salt, but you really can't do much else to it.
So what would you do with this, the Marfax bean? How would you consume this? I mean, I look at this and I think, where's the recipe? Because I just feel sort of lost and I don't know where to start, right? I mean, give me some polenta and I can make a delicious curried polenta square, but I don't know where to start with the Marfax bean. So
so why are we growing beans? I mean, maybe I should start there.
Right.
Or why are we selling beans?
Why are you selling the beans? Yeah.
So grains and legumes on the farm are the perfect complement. So grains are heavy nitrogen feeders. They suck a lot of nitrogen out of the soil, where legumes fix nitrogen through their roots and restore nitrogen to the soil. So in any organic or holistic system, you want to see legumes of some kind that fix nitrogen. So grains and beans go hand in hand, grains and clover, grains and soy. You'll see farmers doing different things. But there was a point a few years ago where we realized that we want to support our farmers in marketing their rotation crops. Part of running a sustainable farm is having markets for all the different things that you might need to grow in an organic system. So we decided to launch this crop rotation line of dry beans, and we're buying dry beans from grain farmers that are in their rotation cycle. So we have a whole host of varieties of beans, but this Marfax heritage variety won a Good Food Award recently. And beans, you soak them, you cook them in water with a little bit of salt. Salt will soften their skins a bit, and then do anything with them. I mean, in our house, we'll cook a big pot of beans without a whole lot of flavoring and turn them into lots of different meals over the course of the week.
Nice.
You can turn them into soup, you can turn them into beans and cornbread, whatever. So if you're at a loss for what to do with beans, we do have a number of recipes on our website that you can check out.
I loved your website. I was actually drooling because I saw all the different cookies and the bars and then the farro salads. It was just so exciting to see how many different ways you can really transform what you have there. So that's exciting. So tell us a little bit about the actual collaboration that's happening right there at the Miller's table. And from the Good Food Awards, you kind of bring it back home to Maine, from San Francisco to Maine. So tell us who these wonderful and enterprising folks are and how you brought them into the Maine Grains sort of foothold.
The Kneading Conference began on the premise that we had a community to build around grains. And Maine Grains, as many of you know, occupies a former county jailhouse in our downtown. It is in the center of the downtown. It is on the cornerstone of our historic district. So there's no missing it. If you come through downtown Skowhegan, you're going to see what we're up to. Because it was a jail, it had a commercial kitchen. So we also launched a cafe called the Miller's Table out of that space, where we feature a Maine wood heat oven and invite people in to taste the grains. But that central location has made it possible for a lot of other things to happen. So the growing farmers market joined us on our site and fills our parking lot on Saturday mornings.
And now it's 3 to...
It went from 3 to, I think, 21 at its peak, and right now we're hovering around 17 in the summer.
Nice.
So it's still a great big market with tremendous diversity. And because it was a jail, we had other infrastructural pieces that have made it possible for us to invite other entrepreneurs into our building. So in this picture with the cow on her shirt, you see Amy Robottom, and she runs Crooked Face Creamery. She grew up on a dairy farm about 5 minutes outside of downtown with a crooked-nosed cow, which is why her business is called Crooked Face.
Love it.
And she makes fresh ricotta-style cheeses, and now smoked mozzarella and other smoked
Gouda.
cheeses.
I think Gouda. Yep.
And so she occupies a space in our building that used to be the laundry room because in her efforts to expand her business, she just wasn't finding the right thing and wasn't finding enough financing to build her own building. And, you know, one day we were brainstorming and I said, have you ever seen our basement where the laundry room used to be? It's got floor drains, which you're talking about, and it's got, you know, cement walls, which are sort of easily cleanable, and you should come take a look. And so anyway, she did, and it has turned out to be the perfect space. It had a lot of the drainage sort of natural systems that she needed to build out her expanded creamery. So she's in our building. As I said, we feature one of Albie and Scott's wood-fired ovens in our cafe. And my sister, who's in the white shirt there, is
your twin.
Is my twin,
right.
And she is an occupational therapist in the Messalonsky district. She's gotten her feet wet with grains and business planning, I guess you could say, in a functional life skills business in her OT program, where she is teaching kids in her classroom how to execute a project that is then sold, made, delivered, sold, money is collected, counted, banked, the students are paid, and then can purchase things with their money. So in essence, she's been figuring this out with a population that needs a little more structure to doing functional life's work. So she sees an opportunity in the high school population that she serves. There's this period where you've had supports in school, but you're graduating, and you may still need supports in order to be successful in your first job. So she started the Good Crust, which is a company that is using our flour to make a frozen pizza dough ball. It's the first pizza dough that we're aware of in Maine that uses 100% Maine grains, local grains. And we use it at the Miller Stable Cafe. You can taste it at Flight Deck Brewing Company. It's now being distributed to natural food stores around the Northeast. And she has a growing business where she is making a pizza dough product, employing a population of folks that need some special supports, and putting her skills in both worlds to work. So we've been able to incubate that right out of, we helped Heather get her business off the ground in our kitchen at the gristmill, but she has now since purchased her own building in Canaan and is in the process of moving right now in order to scale up what she's doing. But the entrepreneurial energy can incubate in an area if you have a high degree of collaboration, and that's certainly what we're finding in Skowhegan. It's the way we want to grow our business and our impact in the community over time. So not just on our site, but we also have a fresh pasta maker, kind of kitty corner across the parking lot from us, the Main Meal, and they make fresh pasta and ravioli using our flour. One of my inspired employees at Maine Grains is now making ice cream sandwiches using the grains and cookies. So it's really blossoming into a whole host of businesses that are
that all started with your grain epiphany.
Well, or that are just highly collaborative and have been working together for a while. So we've got some great relationships.
But that's what I was talking about when I made the intro today, is that, you just see potential where there's perceived lack, and you were able to kind of see that potential and grow it into where it is today, where that's what it looked like and that's how it's going. So, and that's pretty amazing that you have the grain, and then you've got the pizza dough, and you've got the cheese ready to put on the pizza dough, and the fresh farmer's vegetables put on the pizza, and someone making pasta in the back with it. I mean, it's like you've got this whole little ecosystem within this ecosystem of Maine Grains, which is pretty cool.
I mean, not to diminish how much work this all is. I mean, it's a lot of work. But
you get stressed out ever?
For sure. But at the very first Main Street meeting I ever went to, I wasn't quite sure what talent I was supposed to put to work in a downtown revitalization effort. So I asked some of the elders who had lived in the community much longer than I had. One of the fellows who's who had run a local hotel for many, many years. He's no longer with us. I just went to Roger and I said, Roger, I'm new to town. Where should I plug in? What needs my attention the most, or what could use my help the most? And his answer was anything. Pick something that you like to do and focus on it. There's so much work to be done that we just need more people with energy that are willing to plug in and do something. So my life in Skowhegan really started with small bite-sized projects and turned into bigger projects. But I think what you're seeing is a community of people that have all been willing to do the same thing. So every community needs that.
And yours is a great prototype and a successful prototype of how it could get done and should get done in collaboration, so that it's not just all on your shoulders. You can now pass it on, and you have a team of 20 who are running at full speed without you being there. You're in San Francisco, and things all worked out. Right. I mean,
there have been phases of the business where I hate going away, because I'm like, when I come back, someone's going to quit. Someone always quits when I come back.
But that's a whole other piece. It's a managing people, right?
It is, and really it is about cultivating leadership within the company as well. As a business grows, you can't make all the decisions. You can't be the only one making the final say. So you have to cultivate leadership, even if it's people that don't have as much experience with leadership. So we're cultivating leadership skills so that they feel comfortable making those decisions when you're not there. I think we are an anchor business that now we have resources and experiences that we can share to help other entrepreneurs that are coming along. And so part of our growth in the future will involve building out supports and resources. I use the term a service network business. I'm borrowing that from Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but a service network business that actually employs the HR and the IT and the bookkeeping that could be of service to all of the community of businesses in your community, not just mine. Okay. And we've seen our first couple of examples of this in our business, where we needed a bookkeeper for 20 hours a week at one point, and that meant recruiting someone to Skowhegan to be able to help us with that role. But how do you round out a full-time job for someone if you only have 20 hours a week? So we bundled hours. We said, well, we need 20, the cafe needs 10, Crooked Face needs 2, Maine Grain Alliance needs 5. Well, there we have a full-time job. Yeah. And so we hired that staff person under the Maine Grains roof, but we subcontract out her services to other groups. So
that's pretty smart.
It's proven itself out to be very successful. We're seeing that kind of thing happen with marketing and even sales.
It's almost like a co-op, right?
Yeah, so that doesn't need to live under Maine Grains roof forever. Really, that is its own business function to assemble the talent and supports that will be useful to a community of businesses. So that's one way that we hope to grow, and I'm doing some studying on that front with the folks at Zingerman's in Ann Arbor.
Yeah. Let's talk about this guy. I think Rob Todd and everything he's doing with Allagash, that's a really neat collaboration there with 16 counties, the beer. So how did that come around? Did you have a conversation with Rob, or did he reach out?
Yeah. So at face value, this beer here is the beer you should be buying in Hannaford. It is exclusively made with Maine-grown ingredients only. And this was their first foray into developing a beer around exclusively sourcing from Maine. They had come at beer really creatively to create different flavor profiles in the past, but here they wanted to start with the ingredients and see what the flavor profiles were. So in any event, the sale of this beer, they remit a portion of the proceeds back to the Maine Grain Alliance and Maine Organic Farmer and Gardeners Association and Maine Farmland Trust, and they do wonderful things with the proceeds of this beer.
That's awesome.
But Allagash is a wonderful company. They've been a leader. They put out a pledge a couple of years ago to use 1 million pounds of Maine-grown grain by this year, and they have achieved that goal.
Wow.
Rob has been a mentor to me. We at one point formed a board of directors for our company, and really I was looking for key thinkers who could help me think about supply chains and who were a little more experienced than I was. And Rob came to mind, and at the time he said, I'm overcommitted in a few different areas, but I really want to be of help. And so, what I can offer you is lunch a few times a year, and let's just get together, and I'm all ears. And so I take him up on that every once in a while. And Allagash has been a great supporter of the grain movement in Maine.
Oh, absolutely. As long as he buys the beer, it's good.
Yeah.
So Rob Dumas, right here at the University of Maine Co-op Extension. I kind of call him Maine's innovation guy. I've actually done a podcast with him, and he was the person who introduced me to you and your work. And I know that he plays a really important part in Maine in sort of working with the Wymans and all the different places in Maine that really want to cultivate grain or blueberries and kind of create various markets for the state of Maine with agriculture. So how is Rob helping you and Maine Grains?
Rob's fantastic. We met Rob when he was recruited to Maine to head up a food innovation lab up at the University of Maine.
Can I tell you a fun fact real quick about him? He made Barack Obama a really great chilled martini, probably one of the best he's ever made, at Michelle, and he did it in Rio. It was beautiful because he traveled with the Obamas. He was their chef when they traveled.
Yes,
So,
I didn't know this before meeting
Rob. There's a lot of things behind that smile, a lot of stories. So,
I didn't know before meeting Rob that he was a chef in the Navy.
Yes.
And that the Navy has the privilege of cooking in the White House due to long-standing lore that the Navy cooks better food than the other branches in the military. So anyway, he was a chef in the Obama kitchen. And was recruited to Maine to run this innovation lab. So I was introduced to him at the point at which I didn't really know what the innovation lab could offer us, and I went up to have a tour with Rob of the center. And it's a facility that's equipped with just state-of-the-art
It's the pilot.
freeze drying equipment and rolling equipment and packaging equipment. So if you want to know, about what the shelf life of your product is going to do over a period of time, they can help you test those things. So kind of took inventory of what the skills and talents were up there, and then ultimately worked with him on a project 2 different times to help us create recipes for value-added products that we will be working to launch in the coming year. With 2 different focuses. One was the bag you see here, this 2.4-pound bag. The packaging that we've used has had an evolution, and when you're running a business, it's not just about making it look pretty and food safe and packaged appropriately, but it's also about economies of scale of your packaging.
Right.
So we can't afford to pre-print a bag for every single product that we're going to make because the production runs are so huge. So the company we wanted to work with required 25,000 minimum unit runs. So I don't need 25,000 polenta bags at a pop. So we had to create a packaging strategy where we could order 25,000 blank bags, and then the variable information is on the stickers. So we worked with designers to do that. But then what you realize is that the pinch point becomes things like barley or polenta or farro. You maybe in Maine where we have pantries that are a little larger and we like to put things away and keep things stocked up. But in urban environments, they don't want 2.5 pounds of farro at a time. They want to cook a dinner's worth of farro and be done with it for a while and then go back to the corner store when they're ready to buy more. So this bag is too big for some products. So we took this to Rob and we said, look, we know we need a smaller package, but at the same time, our competitor products are the products on the shelf that already have some seasonings in it. All you need to do is dump it in the pot with water, bring it to a boil, cover it, 20 minutes, there's your side dish for dinner or your main dish with a protein. So help us come up with the flavor combinations that highlight our unique grains and can be packaged in smaller format. So it was one project we engaged he and his team on. The other was just baking mixes. We haven't entered into the realm of baking mixes yet, and yet, COVID brought along the sourdough baking movement to some degree. However, there are people that just aren't going to commit the time to baking bread, but might like to make a quick bread if it can be kept simple. And so he helped us formulate some baking mixes as well. So we now have, about 5 of each of those things in store, ready to launch.
In the store?
No, just
okay.
kind of ready to go. And now it is a packaging solution that we're trying to come up with in the coming months that we're working hard on.
But you've got the flavorings, the seasonings all set for market.
Yep.
That's exciting.
Yep. And
so,
we were I know you're going to talk about the governor, but we were successful in getting a Maine Ag Development Grant this year, one of a handful of companies in Maine that were assisted to scale our operations with infrastructure. So some of the equipment that we will buy with that grant supports the launch of value-added products that we worked with Rob on.
Yeah, it was a pretty big grant. I saw that. That's excellent. So let's talk. I do not want to talk too much about COVID, but I do want to talk about a fantastic thing that happened to Maine Grains with the New York Times article by Tim Wu. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened when that article hit? And what was it about?
Sure. Wow. COVID has gone on a while now, but when really things got thick with COVID, you'll probably remember that point in time where restaurants were closing left and right. We lost our largest customer, which is a fast casual restaurant chain in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston that buys our farro. They were closing down almost all but 8 of their restaurants. We lost that customer with their shutdown within days of grocery stores running out of flour on the shelf. And our online sales went berserk, just berserk. People panicked when flour ran out of the shelves. And because ours was available online and we had an infrastructure and a process set up to fulfill orders, that buried us for months and months and months. So at one point we were about 3,000 orders deep. We never shut down. We were an essential business, so we kept coming to work every day and masking up and reading the CDC website every day and hiring all my kids' friends that would show up to the 8 a.m. team meeting who were out of school to help us learn how to pack out orders and manage the online website with us. And
what a great experience.
It was a great experience. And so through that time, those were very long days, and I was pulling double shifts every day for probably 3 months, waking up early to answer customer service emails, lots of personal questions, and as you can imagine, we were all panicked about COVID. Nobody felt safe, and so half of the customer service at that time was just managing anxieties about, well, what if the flour doesn't come? What am I going to eat? What am I going to bake? How do I get it up to my apartment? But just honestly being able to provide a human touch during that period was really important. So I'd go to work, spend 2 shifts, and then end my day doing the same thing, more emailing with customers. Well, in the middle of that time span, Tim Wu, an editorial writer from the New York Times, happened to call. And I'm not that good about answering my phone for spontaneous calls because there's too much to do in a day.
Right.
I often would prefer that I get an email first so that I can schedule time and make sure that I'm fully present for a phone call.
That's good to know, just so you all
But
know.
it was one of those times where I was like, oh, what the heck, I'll just answer the call. And it was him, and he said, I'm writing for the New York Times, and I'm interested in what's going on with the depletion of flour on the shelves right now, and what does that mean for your business, and what do you do? And so his story, I think he intended the story to move in the direction of, if you read it, they featured King Arthur and Maine Grains, and he told me later that his intention was really to feature King Arthur as a small producer of flour that is really thriving through COVID, which they did, and then also give another example, like Maine Grains and how it was impacting us. But after talking with him about why we were doing what we were doing and what things looked like for us and how were we different from King Arthur and who did we work with, he ended up really making Maine Grains a lead in that story around, our model may just be the future of the U.S. economy was kind of his byline. Yeah. So really influential article. And for businesses like ours, and you have a small food business as well, there's nothing like New York Times exposure to wake people up and fuel the frenzy.
I would actually love, I don't know if you guys have read the story, but I'm going to read one excerpt out of it because it's a great quote. And the title of the story is That Flour You Bought Could Be the Future of the U.S. Economy by Tim Wu. And here's what he says. He says, companies like Maine Grains and King Arthur are challenging the commodity pressures in flour markets using methods that were pioneered in the craft beer and local produce markets. The commodity industry takes flour as flour, just an ingredient, the cheaper the better. But baking is also an emotional experience, an act of creation in its beauty and intensity, a long-standing symbol of the home. And it provokes in some a yearning to connect with local soil and local land. And that's what happened during COVID. It was like we were all home, and we all felt like we finally had the time to connect with our cultures. Everyone was posting their culture on Facebook and what their sourdough looked like, and here you guys were. You were primed and ready to go, and
as I sort of started by saying, you know, able to form one-on-one connections with people, trying to continue baking at home and manage family life at home in an incredibly disruptive time. So things have quieted down with online sales, but they have remained much higher than they were pre-pandemic. So the period exposed people to our product that have stayed with us. It also opened up opportunities with even just mainstream grocery stores. So we were delivering to Hannaford a couple of products that we had to deliver to the door of Hannaford, a few Hannafords in the greater Portland area. We still do that, but in the middle of all of this, Hannaford called and said, oh, okay, let's talk about distribution. And so we got picked up by Hannaford during this period, where 3 of our products are now distributed to 175 plus of their stores throughout the Northeast. And so it's been a real opportunity, you know, just an eye-opening moment, I think, even for mainstream groceries around, wow, we could run out of flour. And as I told you in an interview early on, it was not at all that there was a lack of grain. There was no lack of grain, but even large millers were struggling with the time it takes to mill the product, package the product, have the equipment to put it in family flour size bags, which is special equipment, and not all large mills have it. Because if you're a really large mill, you might be milling flour into 50-pound bags. You might be milling flour that you blow into the tank of a truck that then is pneumatically extracted once you get to a really large bakery. So just the infrastructure to even put it in a little bag was not within the large mill's capacity, even in the middle of a pandemic. So we were uniquely positioned. We had one of what you would call a weigh fill machine. It takes a bulk quantity of flour, and with a foot pedal switch, you can deposit the exact amount you want in a retail bag. We bought 2 more in the middle of the pandemic. We staffed up that department, created a double shift to spread people out, but keep all the machines running longer. And so anyway, we've learned a lot.
This is great, and this is why I wanted to talk about the piece, because I just thought it was such a great sort of needle mover for the business and getting the name out. So here's a special guy. I know you mentioned him already, but that's Arie Zingerman. Tell us a little bit, for folks who don't know the Zingermans in Michigan and how influential they've been with their business, why is it that Arie plays such a sort of a strong presence in the way you envision your business?
I learned about his business a bunch of years ago, and then, you know, just starting to learn about him, I heard he was coming to Portland. So I went to go see him at Maine Studios. And Arie and his business partners started a successful Jewish deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, college town, revitalized a little building in order to start their deli, and became a neighborhood institution. But kind of more famously, what they've done is they've been strategic thinkers, so that when the deli was getting quite large, they were sending a driver on staff at the deli to drive an hour and a half every day to go pick up all the bread for the sandwiches and drive it back to the deli for the daily sandwich make. And, you know, eventually said, you know, we're probably at the point where we should just start a bakery, and did that. Then it became an inspired employee that wanted to start a creamery and make cheeses, and then an inspired employee that wanted to make gelato and sweets, and really build off of the original success of the deli. And so you have a customer coming to you already for this one thing, or you have other pieces of what you need for the business. Could you also produce those and create a diversified community of businesses rather than a larger and larger and larger deli? And so what Zingerman's has now is I think it's 13 is their current count. They have a family of 13 businesses. They're all in some way related to the original founders or the original success of the deli. The founders don't own them all, but they play a hand in helping guide them all. So it's chocolate and cheese and bread and the deli and a roadhouse restaurant, But now they created a service network to house IT and HR. They have a training business that's
crazy. Yeah.
If you're going to train all of these employees that you're helping to hire and create, you're kind of training them in the same thing, in the mission and vision of our shared businesses, which is to provide great food, great for service, and great finance and everything that we do. So what does that look like? Well, the training business now does all of the orientation and whatnot. So it's a shared, the model is that the businesses all share a similar approach and a management style, and it's wonderful. And I think it's a way that I see Maine Grains growing. I don't want to keep growing a business that is just larger and larger in scale. At some point, you're just competing with Quaker and General Mills, and we are not going to compete on price, as
Right.
we talked about earlier. We are not
Right.
going to compete on price if we just keep getting bigger. Really, we need to preserve what's unique and special about locally grown, freshly milled grains, and all the ways that can play out of benefit in the community. So I'm learning everything I can about the Zingerman's approach. I did go out to Ann Arbor earlier this fall. Took my daughter with me, who is interested in business management and leadership, and we took a class together on servant leadership and visited a whole suite of the Zingerman's businesses while we were out there. And so I'm reading the books, getting educated, and trying to employ some of the same principles in the way we grow Maine Grains.
When you're done, I need the entire stack
Yep.
because
I'll
I know
share.
there's a whole bunch of them. Thank you for sharing that. And so, I wanted to, leave us here tonight a little more inspired about your product, right? Because we've got it there. We want to know how to get a hold of it, where to get it, and how we can use it. And so you've created this entire community around your grains that are inspired to do different things with them. So how can we play with them? What should we do, and how should we experiment with them? Because obviously you don't have time right now to build an entire, library of recipes yet. You will, but you're busy dealing with the
it's
pandemic.
funny you open with this picture. In the early years of our business, we used to call the oats the gateway grain because people know what to do with oats, right? In the Northeast, it's a cold climate. We eat oatmeal and granola, and that's very familiar. And so often the oats would be the first thing people would buy, and then they would start to experiment with some of the other grains. So oats are easy. Make an energy bar, make your oatmeal, make your granola. Those are all wonderful things. These are actually a breakfast bar that I made to take with me on the set of Martha Bakes when I went to New York City.
Yes, tell us about
so
that.
I wrapped these up as an example of one thing that you could do with rolled oats. There's Martha. Yeah.
There's Martha, but there's you. So let's talk about that picture.
Yeah, Martha's people reached out to
Martha's
us.
people. I love it.
One of Martha's producers reached out to organize an episode on oats because they wanted to feature expertise on oats and wanted us to be a producer expertise. So on this episode, they featured me talking about how oats are processed and all the forms that they come and why they grow well in Maine. And then she made cowboy cookies, and then there was a world-class baker who came on to make a very fancy oatmeal bread. So this was all filmed on her set down in the meatpacking district of New York City, and it was a couple years ago now.
And how wonderful was she to work with?
In September. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
I always think about, I wasn't that nervous to meet Martha. We grew up with my father always saying, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. So that's all I could think about when I was about to meet Martha Stewart is she puts her pants on one leg at a time too.
That's a good way
She was lovely. Martha has a reputation, for better or for worse. I sort of went in with a clean slate. Like the whole scene is really interesting. The entire floor is Martha Enterprises. This set is just one set of like a dozen sets that are all on this floor, and last year's set might have been different colors, and there's cameras all around here. So you're kind of, it's hurry up and wait. You're waiting all day for the moment that you're asked to come on, and they had prepared for me the questions that they were going to prompt Martha with on the video prompter. So I had to be ready to answer them fluently and be ready. When she came on the set, she mingles and roams around and makes small talk for a while. She's a human being. She's great. She's got grandkids. She wants to share pictures of them on her iPhone with you, and she's short. That was my
Really?
first impression.
Oh,
She's
wow.
actually short. I mean, look how tall she looks there, and my impression of her was that she'd be towering above me, and she wasn't.
But she is larger than life,
But
so
what
that's the kind of
happens
thing.
is there's a pair of shoes under her feet that have a platform that are like this. And so when she
figured.
gets behind the counter, she is tall and stately. So anyway, it's always fun to see how this stuff comes together. So it was fun. I was ready to talk about oats. That was easy. A little nerve-wracking because she didn't follow the order or the questions at all. And the people who had set me up and primed me for this piece were kind of going, you know, off to the side. But I answered her questions. It went okay. And then off to the side afterwards, they said, "That was great. That was great." Just that she went off
script. Yeah.
just means she was engaged. It means she was having a lot of fun with the topic. So anyway,
That's
it's
awesome.
been great, and she's gone on to become a huge fan of ours. So we've had
That's
conversations with her about her desire to plant oats on her farm in Katona, New York. She is a lover of the cracked oats, and through COVID was, if any of you follow her, she was videotaping herself out of her kitchen every morning, and I think it was her gardener that was doing all the videotaping in her kitchen. But she gets on one of the shows and does a whole demo on how she prepares Maine Grains cracked oats every morning for breakfast.
That's
and
awesome.
just, you know, results in these little flurries of purchasing and whatnot. So,
That's awesome.
So yeah, we have a nice relationship with Martha. She's just picked us up. She's picked up the cracked oats on her new retail line on martha.com,
Oh,
which is
that's
her
awesome.
first website that interfaces with selling her favorite products. And so anyway.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So next up, the Oprah list.
Jeez, I don't know.
And then you'll be backed up for like months.
I don't know.
Well, that's great. I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation with you today because I think that we covered so much ground, and I want to give you the floor for the last few minutes here. If there's anything else you'd love to share about this entire journey, how you literally have brought this ecosystem full circle back to the mill, right? We kind of went through every facet of it. And again, you're thinking about expanding that even more, but not competing with the big guys, just kind of staying in your lane. And I think that's your secret, is like you own your lane and you figured out how to completely ride in it, you know, and carefully, strategically, mindfully, but, you know, bringing others along with you, which is great.
I mean, I would say that in my past life as a speech pathologist, I did a lot with behavior management and functional behavior analysis, and really what I see in the work I'm doing now, I can credit to the work I was doing previously, which is that really all of this is just solving problems of a different kind, one bite at a time, and the ability to break down a big problem into finite chunks and tackle them every little bit and figure out how to celebrate little successes as exactly where you need to be on the path to bigger successes. And so the more we sort of keep at it, I mean, every day there's problems to solve, every day. And so the more you just keep solving them and moving past them, before you know it, that's behind you and you're solving bigger problems and creating new opportunities. So we are 20 employees now at the mill, and we hire another dozen or so at the cafe. So we're now trying to figure out how we continue to grow in a Zingerman's-like style and expand the opportunities in Skowhegan by building more infrastructure next to our buildings. So in the coming years, you may see us build a building next door to Maine Grains that will house some of this value-added processing equipment that I'm talking about, but also administrative offices. We don't have enough room for people
And
that
how
we
about
want to
like
hire
a
now.
TV studio where you
Yeah.
can like teach us about grains right from Maine Grains and have like this place where we can come and learn and you know, kind of have like a King Arthur school kind of thing, but for Maine.
Yeah, so we have some expansion to do in that
In your
way.
spare time.
And so I'm actively working on that right now.
That's exciting.
But you know, every community needs these kinds of efforts, and early on after getting the mill off the ground, I would get calls from different communities saying, oh, can you help us start a grain mill in our community too? And I would often say, if you need a grain mill, great, but it doesn't agree. The magic here is not that it's a grain mill necessary, but that we have figured out how to creates something that Maine really needed in order to open up opportunities. And for different areas, that may be something different, but build a constellation of opportunities around it. And so I'm thankful all the time that it has worked and that we're successful at what we're doing. And it is still challenging. It is not easy by any means. And we will persist at it. You know, the next decade really needs to include, now that we have found markets for these products, to continue to grow the growers, the grower base, because we will need more supply. There's plenty more land in Maine, but we need to keep helping farmers with sustaining the markets that support organic production in Maine and more grain growing. So that's a real focus of mine right now, is continuing to connect with more farmers.
That's awesome. You've sowed some great seed here in Maine, and we're really thrilled about that, aren't we? That's awesome. Thank you, everyone, for this. It's so exciting. Now, before we let you go, we always love to open it up for a quick Q&A. We do realize that everyone's been sitting here very patiently, but we do have Maine Grain t-shirts to give away. So we'd love to see if you guys had any questions for Amber that maybe we didn't cover today and you've been waiting so patiently. The one thing we'll say is if you do stand up and ask a question, Amber is going to repeat the question so that we have it for the camera, because the camera doesn't pick you up because you're not mic'd. So please be patient with us. But Amber is so methodical that not only did she bring t-shirts, she brought them in every size so that no matter who stands up and asks the question,
send you home with the right
we're gonna get a
size.
t-shirt. And that's what I love about her. She thinks things through. It's not like, hey, let me throw some t-shirts in a bag. She is precise. All right, so who would like to have, there you go. All right, what size are you, by the way? I'm just kidding.
I'll take the first question from a small, please. Yeah. No, just kidding.
Years ago, I was fortunate enough to be in Skowhegan during their community pancake breakfast.
Yes.
And you served fabulous multi-grain pancakes.
Yes.
And I asked you, this is so good, you need to put this in packaging. Is this going to be one of your value-added products that you're going to
Oh,
Can you repeat the
that
question?
is so sweet.
So good.
So she's asking about a multigrain pancake that she tasted at our community pancake breakfast that happens every year during Maple Fest, during the week of maple syrup celebration in Skowhegan. That's a sweet question because that recipe was created by, innovated by a dear friend of mine, Lisa, who was our first office manager at Maine Grains. Sadly, she was diagnosed with a very rapidly progressing cancer and passed away a couple of years ago. Oh, no. But as a good friend of hers who often cooked with her and we shared recipes, but I will say she never wanted to share her recipes. So on her deathbed, one of the things I did with her was I sat with her recipe book and she was willing to talk with me about the recipes. But she would not give me that one. And I know that it was, she would pulverize the oats, so it was oat flour and it was sifted wheat. And I know that it was buttermilk and one of the secrets was orange juice. I just don't know the proportions. She would only give that recipe as she was dying to Matt Dubois at the Bankery, which is another bakery in Skowhegan. He is now the only one that has it, and he is producing a little bit of that pancake mix during the Maple Week to sell in her memory and cook at the pancake breakfast. So the pancakes will live on, but I still don't know that recipe, unfortunately.
That's a great story. Well, that's a great story. And wow, I can't believe you remembered that. It was that good.
Yeah, they are delicious.
That's awesome. Anybody else have a question? Sure.
So, Amber, I was always really impressed when we come up to the farmers market in Skowhegan, the work that you guys were doing in making organic food accessible to people with lower incomes. I'm wondering what thoughts, if any, you've had about making Maine Grains accessible to people with lower incomes.
Great question. Great question. Thank you, Tim. The question is stemming from some of the work we've done in Skowhegan to make local food accessible to a socioeconomically diverse population that we have in Skowhegan. What are we doing at Maine Grains to make the grains available to everyone? I'll explain the first. Tim is familiar with some of the programs that we piloted and continue to run in Skowhegan. But we partnered early on in this farmers market growth with the Wholesome Wave Foundation out of DC. They were piloting these double dollar programs where you would double the value of a SNAP transaction at farmers markets in order to extend the ability to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables from local farmers. Very successful at changing purchasing habits among low-income families to purchase from local farms. That early work now lives on in some federal monies that flow through to states, and in the state of Maine that right now flow through to the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets to support the Harvest Bucks program. Same idea. Depending on how much funding is in that pot, it's not always a doubling. Right now, you get 50% of the value of your SNAP purchase at the farmer's market back in coupons that allow you to buy more food. So that was one program that we piloted in Skowhegan. Another was their fruit and vegetable prescription program, partnered with doctors and health professionals that could provide nutrition counseling. Families were offered the equivalent of $1 per family member per day to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables at your local farmer's market, paired with nutrition counseling. The Wholesome Way Foundation was trying to show that indeed, as does happen, in a 4-month market season, a good chunk of your participants will decrease BMI, body mass index. So you have an impact on obesity in just 4 months if you help to extend the ability to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables. So anyway, we were one of their first rural partners to partner on those programs and show that they are in fact effective, and they live on in various ways. I'm now, the Miller's Table Cafe in our building has a bread baking program, so we joined the farmers market. I've always been a volunteer to help support the farmers market and cheerlead and organize, but I've never been a member, and now I'm a member. And so now I'm the treasurer also, and so now I get to see some of the flow through of like what is the breakdown of low income purchases in our market. The presence of the electronic processing card machines in a market make it possible to process not only credit cards but EBT cards, and I can tell you that in this past summer's market season, we did about $30,000 on EBT purchases alone, which were then matched 1-for-1 by charitable dollars, comprising a total overall card processing impact to our market of like 30 to 40% of our market is low-income shoppers, which wow. I don't know what it is in other states in Maine, but when I report that to the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets, they think that's an impressively large number. So in any event, we've been successful encouraging and making ourselves welcoming to low-income families. I think, to answer your question, Tim, it's complicated. I don't think it's just about making resources available. I also think it's about being welcoming and breaking down barriers that prevent people from even entering a farmer's market. Sometimes it's just, I don't know who those people are. I'm not sure if I'm welcome. Will there be anything for me? I don't understand the system. Who's going to show me? What if I'm afraid to ask questions? And so, we've seen markets addressing those things. For us, we saw some early impact by creating free family fun at the farmers market. So live music, activities for kids. Sometimes it's the kids that are like, I'm going in, and the parents follow, and then you have what I think is really important socioeconomic mixing at the community level that helps break down barriers around food and food insecurity, but also reveals opportunities in the getting to know you process. So, really through some of that mixing, we were able to identify, I couldn't have told you who the EBT shoppers were in Skowhegan previously, but coming to know some of that and realize that this person's looking for a job and we've got a job and let's make a match. Some of that has happened out of those programs. We just worked with a UMass Amherst student as an intern to set Maine Grains up to accept EBT in our dry goods shop, which was kind of a missing link for those shoppers coming to the market outside our door to be able to then come inside our door and be able to buy the grains from us. And so that is now possible. And then we also use our byproducts in some interesting ways to try to make them available. So every day when we turn on the stone mill, for example, there is a catch off the mill that is not quite ready to divert to packaging because we're still getting the texture right and we're feeling it every morning. So while it's still a little too coarse and becoming fine, we're catching it. It's still a food grade product. It makes wonderful bread and muffins and pancakes and all those things, but to package it, we want it to be of a consistent particle size. So that is a stream that we donate to schools. We sell at cost to the Good Shepherd Food Bank's Mainers Feeding Mainers program. When it accumulates, they'll come pick up all that we have. Sometimes that product is sold very inexpensively to a correctional facility up north of us that has an in-house baking program led by Mark McBride, a phenomenal leader who used to be involved with MAFCA teaching composting and got a job in the correctional facility and has just created and transformed their food program at the Mountain View Correctional Facility, where all of the breads are now made in-house using a combination of our byproduct flour and other flour that they get and produce that they grow, saving the facility gobs of money every year that they can then plow into other kinds of resources. So there will be a documentary coming out about that program sometime soon, and we'll be sure to let people know when that's finally out. But that's an incredible story up there as well.
Yeah, which reminds me of Dave's Breads.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole story of doing it in the jail. That's awesome. Does anybody have a couple of last questions here? Sure. We'll come right back to you. Sorry, you had a question?
Yes, since you brought up Lamke, what's your connection with that to the Common Ground Fair?
Great. What is our connection to MAFCA and the Common Ground Fair? So early in our mill's history, we did sell in the business section. It was before we had the diversity of products that we have now, so our setup was kind of small. Now we support the efforts of the Common Ground Fair really through the Maine Grain Alliance, and we contribute flour and we go in a demonstration capacity with one of these wood-fired ovens that's mobile. A team of people make all of the hearth breads that feed the volunteers for the fair. So we're part of that effort. We are a MAFCA certified organic facility, so we engage in that inspection process every year. We sell certified organic products. A few of our products are produced without the use of chemicals but are not grown on certified land, so we are accountable to all of those special systems and documentation that are necessary to make that possible.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had a question?
Well, the last movie I saw here was Julia, and I wondered if you had ever thought of the fact that you have such a great germ, pun intended, for a movie, or at least people truck up to King Arthur to take $1,000 baking classes. I mean, is that a niche you have, thought about? Is a match for you?
Yeah, have we thought about baking classes and being a destination for baking education? Yeah, yes. I think we are fortunate in that we've got the Maine Grain Alliance, which operates as a nonprofit and does some of that education and is really built to organize those things, that we work in partnership with Maine Grains, the mill. So we sponsor a lot of those efforts. We feed those efforts with ideas about who's hot and new out there doing interesting things with local grain and bread. Sometimes we lead them, sometimes we host them. In a new facility next door to our building, we certainly will build a demonstration kitchen so that we have that capacity there. I'm getting the advice from local economic developers not to think too small about new building next door, because it's easy to underbuild for these kinds of ideas. We have a very successful little dry goods shop at our facility that is all of 150 square feet. And it turns a lot of revenue every year, and you can't even really see in the space because it's in a section that used to be a kind of like a deputy's office. It was isolated from the rest of the jail, and so it's got these tiny little windows with bars, and so you can't even really see in the windows to see what's going on in there. So we do have a dream that in the new building next door, we will build out a more inviting, more beautiful retail space for our grains that can certainly host all kinds of things. So yes, that is on our mind. I do want to honor the first three people that asked questions.
Oh, we will definitely.
With
We'll
okay.
have the.
If you were one of the first three, please remember to come up at the end. Yes.
I know you had talked about sourdough just very briefly, but I was wondering, do you work with a lot of bakeries in the state of Maine that create and make sourdough products?
Yeah, I would say the product that we make, because it is freshly milled, it's full of the German oils we talked about. It has a liveliness to it when you're working with it, it lends itself to natural fermentation baking. So a lot of our customers are sourdough bakers. Not all of them, but I would say the majority of them. So, Scratch Bakery, Standard Bakery, Tinder Hearth,
Night Moves. Yeah,
all of those sourdough bakers in Maine are all using our products. And I consider our marketplace really the Northeast, so Maine to New York City and a little bit beyond. So lots of bakeries between here and there that are using our grains. Yep. And sourdough really had a moment through COVID because, they suspect that, people have had time on their hands to try some of the things that they hadn't had time to dive into, and sourdough was one of them. All right, I've got time, I'm home, I'm gonna figure this out. And so it definitely fueled a lot of baking and social media posting about sourdough. We started selling dehydrated sourdough to help get people started, to inoculate a home culture and get it going a little bit faster, and that sold like great guns.
Awesome.
Good
Great.
questions. Thank
So
you.
I don't know if they know this, but you have 2 grown children, one off in college, one about to go to college next year, and you're doing all of this at the same time. And we want to make sure we all share that she's also a mother of 2 incredibly vibrant mini Amber and Mike's running around Skowhegan, future leaders. One that's sitting on the board of Maine Grains as a junior board member, and that's Zoe.
Yeah. My
So,
kids have really
passing
grown
it
up
on.
through all of this, and in the early years of buying the building, they were just knee-high and
What a great story. for
stomping
them.
around the hallways. But yeah, they're great kids. My son Miles is at Wesleyan in Connecticut playing soccer and learning a ton. My daughter is interested in business and maybe joining us someday, no pressure. But both of them have been integral parts of what we do. They've had jobs in both businesses. My favorite story of COVID, actually, one last story.
Sure.
Was both of my kids joined the PAC team, but my daughter, whose birthday also falls in the Virgo frame that I do, thinks a lot like me. And so we had this moment where I'm being pulled in 1,000 directions in a busy day of trying to pack out all these orders, and she is managing some of the customer service communications on the computer. And she needs to source a piece of information off of my laptop, which I'm on the phone and I'm talking to the other people, and I could not stop to address what her particular question is. Well, she gave up on me and was like, never mind, and I see her thinking like me. She can get inside my head, so she figured out where I would probably organize this in my laptop by going to, this folder, subfolder over here, and then this subfolder to get the piece of information that I had never taught her to go there, but she could just implant herself in my brain to find. And
Wow.
It was one of those moments that was like, oh my gosh, this kid's been watching since she was little, and somehow it's in there,
You're raising future leaders.
That's right.
That's awesome. What a great story. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And please, let's just give Amber the biggest hand because she has flown in from San Francisco and she's driving back to Skowhegan after a very long day at work. So thank you for being here.